Hello YouTube, Dave here again. Today I'm going to be doing an overview and review of the adventure Chronicles of Sorrow, Sorrow's Ruin. This is available on DM's Guild, and I was contacted by the writer of the adventure to do a review and try to spread some awareness for it. So this adventure is designed for first level characters and is meant to be played more or less in a single session. The setup for the adventure has the player characters being part of a caravan guard. However, the wagon that hired them is supposed to be meeting up with a much larger contingent of caravans and wagons, which have been delayed for some reason. It's something that's not actually pertinent to the adventure itself, but the characters have been spending quite some time in the town of Secomber just waiting for this other wagon to show up for them to link up with. In the meantime, as the characters are just sort of resting and worrying about running out of money, a female priest from the Temple of Ilmater bursts into the tavern or the inn where they're staying and is looking quite distraught. And it's basically the high priest, or the priest overseeing the temple, Brother Drandar, was abducted. And she hopes that the player characters will search for Brother Drandar and bring him back safely. As it turns out, Brother Drandar was captured by a group of cultists to the god Loviatar, and Loviatar and Ilmater are very much on opposite sides. So Ilmater is a god who believes that more or less that suffering is something that's a finite resource, and there's only so much suffering in the world to go around. Some disciples take this to the extremes and try to make themselves suffer as much as possible so that others won't. And Loviatar is about spreading, suffering and pain to everyone. So the two religions definitely do not get along. The reason that Brother Drandar was captured is the cultists of Loviatar want to learn information about a supposed chosen of Ilmater, a female tiefling by the name of Sorrow. They learn of her and plan to sacrifice her as an offering to Loviatar and to deal a significant blow to the faithful of Ilmater. Upon rescuing Brother Drandar, the player characters are then sent to some ruins, a ruined shrine, I think, to Ilmater, the sacred ruin, known as the Shrine of Tears, where Sorrow waits. She's actually being set upon by cultists when the player characters arrive. If they clear out the cultists and rescue Sorrow, she can kind of explain the situation and how she received a dream kind of going over the last information or the last bits of life from the Martyrs of Ilmater, who once occupied this area. About 5 years ago, a location beneath the shrine, known as the Grotto of Forbearance, was set upon by, again, the evil cultists of Loviatar, and the grotto was defiled. The grotto was actually sealed off, and the only way to unseal it is either through Sorrow's tears or her blood. Sorrow admits that if she's able to retrieve a relic from the grotto, then she will be able to leave this place once and for all, and to seal the Grotto of Forbearance once and for all, leaving the spirits of the deceased martyrs of Ilmater in peace. So she offers to open up the access to the grotto. The characters can kind of go in and explore, and the grotto is actually a really interesting location. The grotto has a series of just small mausoleums and tombs that the characters can enter and interact with the spirits of the dead martyrs that are in there. So should they go in, each of the mausoleums has like these words that will magically appear in the air, and a voice that will speak to them and ask them to present some sort of information. For example, one of them says, I'll just read the first one off here. So it says, "This airy tomb features a single sarcophagus. As you enter, a small flash of light..." Just a second here. I made this a bit small. Let's just bring that up to 7. There we go. So this airy tomb features a single sarcophagus. As you enter, a small flash of light bursts from the tomb. A moment later, translucent prismatic letters float in the air above it. Written in the common tongue, they say, Saint Alteraz implores you to speak of Ilmater's mercy, and if the characters are able to do so, either through making an appropriate religion check, or by actually just talking about the tenets of mercy from the faith of Ilmater, they can get some magical bonuses conveyed on them temporarily. So in this particular one, if they manage to succeed, then sort of a magical glyph appears in the air. If the characters interact with it, they get the benefits of a bless spell cast on them that lasts for 7 minutes, and it can affect up to 6 player characters. Some of the other ones, there's another blessing that imbues the character's weapons with the magic weapon spell. That can only be bestowed upon up to 4 characters. And there's another one that can only affect a single target. In the end, the characters explore the grotto, and they find the heart of the martyr. And or the martyr's heart, I should say. Sorry, that's the wrong phrase. But once they find the martyr's heart, they can bring it back to Sorrow, and she can use it to seal the grotto forever. And that's essentially where the adventure ends. Now, protecting the Martyr's Heart is a group of... And undead who are swarm this area, so if you go into any of the mausoleums, the risen undead, corrupted versions of the martyrs will attack them. In this case, the Martyr's Heart is actually protected by either some shadows or a shadow and a specter, depending on the size of the player, or the size of the group of player characters. But again, once they bring the Heart of Sorrow, or the Martyr's Heart to Sorrow, the adventure is considered to be more or less over. Now Sorrow, along with Brother Drandar, who thank them gratefully for what they've done, actually implore them to stay behind and to become guardians of Secomber and the Western Heartlands more or less as a whole against the machinations of the cultists of Loviatar. And to do this, they actually offer them sort of a stronghold in Veilguard Spire. And Veilguard Spire is a very rundown, ramshackle location, but it's something that can be upgraded using like downtime and gold pieces. So it actually makes for an interesting, very early reward that the characters can sort of get their own base of operations. That's essentially the adventure. Now, that's the story behind it, and that's sort of the premise and the things that you can get sort of as rewards. But one thing that I really want to say is that this is a very, very well-written and well-thought-out adventure. The writer put a lot of time and attention to detail and tried to come up with basically scenarios for a lot of different, results for several different scenarios, including what happens if the player characters refuse various parts of the mission or if they wait too long. So when they go to rescue Brother Drandar, for example, if they go right away, they sort of get like an element of surprise sort of thing, and they bypass an encounter. If they wait until morning, they actually get attacked by a pack of wild boars as they're making their way to the keep where Brother Drandar is being held. And the contingent of guards might actually be a little bit higher, so you can make it more difficult for itself, but it actually spells out what happens if the player characters actually wait. And in several places it just has a little bit of information on what happens if the characters actually refuse any parts of the adventure. So for example, when the female priestess comes in distraught saying that Brother Drandar has been kidnapped, if the characters refuse or don't offer to help find him, then she will run off, and if the characters do eventually decide to go there, either being feel pressured by the citizens of Secomber who view them as selfish or cowardly, then they'll find her there as well. So it's just some interesting things, and there's even information on what happens to Sorrow if the characters don't arrive in time or if they wait too long to go after her. Another great thing about this adventure is there's some investigative elements as well, so it's not all just straightforward combat. When the characters learn that Brother Drandar has been captured, then they can actually go around and speak with some of the notable NPCs in town, and the information that they get can depend on some of their checks and rolls. So, for example, some people may not consider it to be that unusual that Brother Drandar was captured because he does tend to preach awfully hard at people, and someone may have taken it the wrong way. And it's not the first time that he's been taken captive and kind of beaten for his beliefs. So There's stuff like that. And another really, really great thing about this adventure, and I think what makes it really useful for especially beginner DMs, is not only how much the stuff is really laid out, but the fact of the matter is that every single encounter, I'm just going to zoom in a little bit here. So every single encounter is scaled based on the amount of player characters in the party. And this is something that I think that not necessarily enough adventures actually do. Some of them will give out like general guidelines, but this one actually puts it in a chart form for every single encounter. It's not just the one that I've shown here. It's literally every single encounter has this done. And this is a great tool for the player characters, or not player characters, for dungeon masters who again are new to this and may not know necessarily how to scale things. And learning to scale encounters is an important skill. Like myself personally, I just ran my most recent installment of my monthly D&D Adventures League game, Tomb of Annihilation game, and I normally have 5 players at my table, so I'm used to sort of writing things or preparing things for that group. This time I actually had more players join than the maximum table size by Adventures League rules. Like, I actually had 8 people show up to play in this adventure, so I had to try to find a way to scale things really quickly. Now, I did it simply by increasing the amount of hit points that each monster had, because I already had the miniatures picked out for everything. But learning to scale things is very, very important. And I think that this does a really excellent job. It also has a lot of great things for more advanced players. Like, for example, that getting that keep that they can potentially, own and having to upgrade it and stuff like that. That's something that I think some older players may be more interested in, because it kind of harkens back to the days of having strongholds once you got to certain points in your character progression. So having one of those and being able to upgrade it over time is, again, very, very important. Another thing that I really like about this adventure is that it does focus on what I consider to be all too often forgotten deities and their conflict and struggles in the Forgotten Realms world. I mean, Ilmater and Loviatar are actually some of the more unique or interesting gods, but they're minor enough that major adventures tend not to focus on them really at all, in favor of some of the more established gods like Bane or Cyric or Helm or Torm, or individuals along those lines. So it's actually really, really cool to see these very, very rarely used gods being at the forefront of the narrative in this particular adventure. And I think that that's something that is, again, really, really well done, and I really appreciate the amount of effort that went into this, and just the uniqueness of the adventure itself. Exploring the Grotto of Forbearance, for example, has some really interesting elements to it. Like I said, entering the crypts and interacting with the spirits of the deceased martyrs. And sort of having the magical blessings that can be bestowed upon them, it rewards exploration, and I think that that's something that's really cool. Now, again, each of these tombs does have guardians, like skeletons or zombies, that watch over them, so if the characters enter, then they'll kind of rise up from the waters behind the actual grottos themselves. Or not the grottos, the tombs themselves. But it's something that, again, rewards exploration. I think that that's, again, really, really cool. And it's also nice that, really, this is something that could be done in a single session. Now, if you're doing character generation as well, that's not going to be done in a single session unless you're running like a 6 to 8 hour session. But if you're looking at a typical, 3 to 4 hour session, you can probably get this entire adventure in if the characters already have, or the players already have their characters done up. This is an excellent adventure. The character of Sorrow is also very interesting and well developed and well thought out. And it'd be interesting to see the future installments of this series, because this is supposed to be a trilogy of adventures. So it'd be interesting to see how they use Sorrow going forward. Another thing that I will say that I do like about this is, even though Sorrow is sort of the titular character and does play a very important role in the story of the adventure itself, one of the things that I like about it is that the Dungeon Master, or not the Dungeon Master, the writer, didn't put her is like completely like in with the she doesn't follow the player characters, for example, unless, you know, one of the players dies and uses her as a replacement character kind of idea. But she's on sort of the outside of the events taking place in the story. She drives the narrative, and she's sort of the main idea behind the adventure, but it's the writer didn't make her the focus of absolutely everything in terms of going through the adventure itself and having her be sort of like a bigger force than the characters themselves. Like, there are some adventures where when they're written with an NPC, specific named NPC, that named NPC joins the players and is usually someone who can potentially outshine them. So I've seen that happen quite a few times, and I really like this writer's approach where she's the driving force behind the narrative, but she stays on the periphery, which is, again, what I like. And it's interesting to see if that holds up throughout the rest of the other two adventures. Another thing that I think is actually really interesting about this is that the entire adventure uses monsters straight from the monster manual. So there's actually not a single, like, named NPC enemy that the characters would fight, and it's one of those things that actually makes me, or reminds me, of some of the old school AD&D modules. So especially some of the early ones where you just kind of fight monsters, and it doesn't necessarily have to end in a boss fight with a named NPC who is more powerful than everybody else. It's a trope that, you know, is really easy to fall back on. But this adventure actually avoids that, and you fight monsters from the monster manual all the way through. So it actually kind of has a bit of an old school feel to it as well, which is something that I like even further, especially since I'm looking to start running a first edition AD&D game. So anyway, the adventure is the Chronicles of Sorrow. Let's get back up here. Chronicles of Sorrow, Sorrow's Ruin. This is the first one of the series for first level characters. Excellent adventure, really, really well done, well thought out. The locations are interesting, and again, well done. And this is something that I can see myself very much wanting to run for a group of players. So I recommend checking this adventure out if you're interested in it, if you want something that's a little bit different than some of the standard adventures that, you know, I think a lot of us do see these days. This one is really definitely worth checking out. The writer, Blaze, did an excellent job with this, and I hope I'm pronouncing your name right. If I'm not, I do apologize, but you did an excellent job with this. It's a fantastic adventure, and I think more people should definitely check this out. So there you go, Chronicles of Sorrow, Sorrow's Ruin, an adventure that I do strongly recommend checking out if it's something of interest to you. Anyway, thank you guys very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video, and if you've played through this adventure, if you have this, and the other two adventures, or any of the other future adventures that have been done, released so far, let me know what you think of them in the comments below. I'd really like to know sort of how the rest of the events unfold. So anyway, once again, thank you guys very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed, and we'll see you next time. Take care.